Hello, it's Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis. It's May 31st, 2020, and I want to talk to you a little bit today about bifoliate cattleyas. I made a video last year talking about bifoliate cattleyas, and I'll provide a link here for that. Um, but I kind of want to give an update for one of the plants that I discussed, and also just want to kind of reiterate or sort of go over, I guess, some of the points that I talked about last time. And basically, today I'm going to show you a little bit, or talk to you a little bit about general care for bifoliate cattleyas, and then I'll get into some exceptions. I'll show you some success stories, and I'll show you a plant that I'm having some issues with. So let's get started. First of all, what are bifoliate cattleyas, and how are they different than standard cattleyas? Well, as you can imagine from the name, bifoliate, two-leaved. So two-leaved cattleyas typically they grow under similar conditions to sort of standard cattleyas or unifoliate cattleyas. A lot of the hybrids that you see, those big floofy with big elaborate lips and only one leaf. They're going to grow in a similar manner to, but somewhat different than bifoliate cattleyas. The flowers on bifoliate cattleyas are typically different than the unifoliates. Unifoliates, like I mentioned, are kind of frilly and they're sort of that classic Cataleya look. And then as you add in line breeding and some of the hybridization, these unifoliates will look, like I said, very standard, very what you expect a Cataleya to look like. Whereas the flowers on bifoliates are typically, they're often thicker, they're often very waxy, they're often intensely fragrant, not always, but very often they're intensely fragrant, depending on the species and the background of a hybrid. But really, to me, when I think about a bifoliate Cattleya, I'm thinking glossy flowers, tall bulbs, thin bulbs, and um, and, and yeah, and let's jump off there. So some of the thin bulb species, as you can imagine, having a thin bulb means you're not really storing as much energy for drought. Let's say, in the same way that a Cataleya purpurata, which used to be Laelia purpurata, or Cataleya labiata, or persivaliana, or ludemaniana, they have these sort of thickened bulbs, and they're very well adapted to drought conditions because they have the energy stored in their bulbs. Whereas bifoliate Cattleyas, they often don't have as harsh of a winter in terms of losing rainfall, and they are not as tolerant of extended periods of drought. And one of the things that I've noticed, if they'll even skip dormancy if you keep watering. So I water my bifoliates a little longer each winter, and if I'm giving them more water, they're going to keep growing, usually. Not always, but typically. So I can get another round of growth by continuing to water these guys. And so from that perspective, that's where you start seeing a little bit of differences. In wintertime, as you're backing off your unifoliate or your standard Cattleya watering, and giving them extended periods of dry conditions. Maybe don't do that quite as much for your bifoliates. You're still going to want to back off your water in the wintertime, especially if they're not growing. Back off the fertilizer, but maybe not as harsh as you would do for unifoliates. Now, if you're not giving your unifoliates a particularly harsh winter, then maybe you don't have a difference between your bifoliate and your unifoliate care at all. And that's fine as well. Um, uh, Another one of the major differences between unifoliates and bifoliates is repotting. So unifoliates, they typically bounce back fairly quickly, and if you repot at the wrong time, for unifoliates, you can set your plant back a little bit, but they're not going to sulk. Bifoliates, on the other hand, are going to sulk. There is a very slim window, very small window that you need to repot your bifoliates. And that's right as those new growths are popping out of the bulb, of the new bulb. And I'll show you an example of that here in a second. In fact, might as well just show it to you right now. This is Cattleya Zachary Hodes. And you see You see these little tiny nubbins coming out? This is the perfect time that you want to repot this particular plant. And that's actually true for all Cattleyas. When you see your roots just starting to poke out like that, that's the best time to repot that Cataleya. And if for some reason you do it at a different time when there's no active root growth or the roots are this long, it's never good, the new roots. A unifoliate's going to bounce back a little quicker. Bifoliate Cattleyas, on the other hand, that's a really, really good way to kill your bifoliate Cattleya, is to repot when it's not actively putting out those new growths, those little tiny nubbins. So, I could probably give this another week or maybe 2, and then I wouldn't want to repot it. So what I'll do, in fact, I've got another one that's right there popping out. Maybe you can see it. So this is the perfect time to repot. The media in this particular one is not breaking down. So what I'll do is I'll take this pot and simply put it in a larger pot so this guy can keep walking out of the pot. So that's a little tip there. I grow mine, fertilize, fertilize whatever your preferred fertilizer is, a balanced or whatever you're using for the rest of your collection. These guys are just fine with. And generally, you're going to want to give bright light, the same as your unifoliates. Although there's some exceptions. I learned of an exception this week actually, and I'll show you my problem plant and how I'm going to fix that. It has to do with light. So with that, the sort of conclusions of growing bifoliate Cattleyas is they want to be watered all year round if possible. Fertilize whatever you're fertilizing the rest of your plants, and generally give them bright light, but there are exceptions. There are a few species that don't like bright light, and no matter what you do, repot only in that very narrow window where the new roots are coming out of the new growth. And you'll have to do your research. Some species are putting the roots out after the new growth is complete, like this little Cattleya Zachary. This new growth is complete. Or they'll do it at the beginning as the new growth is coming out. So just research which ones you have. So now I want to give you some examples of bifoliates and what they look like. And the sort of, when I think of a bifoliate Cattleya, I think of Cattleya tigrina, which up until fairly recently was called Cattleya Leopoldii. This is a now blooming size plant. So this plant, as you see this, the sheath here is all puffed up. It's got buds that are about to erupt, and this will be this guy's first blooming. So I'm pretty excited for that. I got this particular plant from Miller's Tropicals here in the Austin area. Todd and Susie are great. I love buying plants from them. They have a lot of H&R stock, H&R nurseries from Hawaii. For those of you who are not aware, some of the best Cattleya breeders in the world, and they have a lot of their stock. This particular plant is Super Dark by Carnival, and I'm having a tough time with the tag because it is cemented in there with the roots. And I want to show you, if I can, a couple of things. Let's see if I can get this camera down and show you some roots. There are some roots coming out, some big fat roots right there, and generally these roots are, this is past the good time for repotting. So I would not want to repot this right now. The roots are this long and up to about, as far as I can see, about that long. I've got this in large grade orchiata bark, and that's pretty much what I grow all my Cattleyas in. On the bottom of this clay pot, I'll have some eco web or epi web, and that just provides space. Some people use styrofoam peanuts or rocks, whatever you can get air circulation on the bottom of your pot. This guy as I said, I use clay pots. I like clay pots. They breathe. In my hot summer temperatures, uh, there's kind of a cooling effect around the clay pots, and I think the plants appreciate that. I've had so much better results for my plants ever since I started using clay pots. So it works. Keep going. So this is This is when I think of a bifoliate Cattleya. This is the sort of classic. 2 leaves. I almost pointed to this new growth. I guess that's another point that I could talk about is a really happy bifoliate Cattleya isn't limited to 2 leaves. This guy has 3 leaves, as you can see. I have noticed that, and for unifoliates, you can have 2 or even 3 leaves on a particularly vigorous plant. They're typically on the younger plants, I should say, will put out this sort of extra leaf. And as they get older, they don't always put out an extra leaf. But when they do, it means they're happy and they're doing really well. So this plant is happy and doing really well. This is a success story. Yay. The next one is also a success story. This I also got from the Millers, Miller's Tropicals. This wonderful thing is Cattleya Zachary Hodes, which is a primary hybrid between Cattleya harrisoniana and Cattleya violacea. So 2 similar looking flowers, and this particular one is a nice rubra. Not particularly strong in the scent department, nothing really special. It's got some scent, but nothing amazing. Notice a broken leaf here. But yeah, so you've got 3 blooms here. This is the 3rd blooming, I think. I absolutely love the color on this. Really nice, dark pink. I've even seen it darker than this. The shape is okay. You can see that the petal tips are kind of curled back, and there's some ruffling, and it's not going to win any awards, but it's really nice. I like having this one in my collection, and it's happy. I mean, you can see how big this thing is. This is a bifoliate, but again, I've got 3 leaves here. I've got 3 leaves here. I've got 3 leaves here, one of which is cut. 3 leaves here. So this is a large, mature plant that is just cranking out 3 leaves on a very regular basis. So it's super happy. This is also another one that you can see as the new growths are maturing, they're putting out flowers at the same time, and there's no roots. So this one will probably put out new roots after the flowers are faded and done. And some of the species do that. There's an interesting one I had. It was growing up, right? So, you want your Cattleyas to grow across the pot, right? This one decided to grow up. So I wedged a piece of wood underneath it, a piece of oak, and it has completely solidified this large chunk. It's putting out some new roots from some of the older roots. And yeah, it's doing really well. I'm pretty happy. I like this guy a lot. I think the next time I go to the Millers, I might see if they have any siblings. So now for my sort of problem plants. In the last video that I mentioned earlier, where I talked about bifoliates, I had a problem plant, and it is this one. Cataleya Glossa, Cerulean. I got a division of this from my friend Melinda, and as you can see, it's potted in plastic. I haven't done that in a bunch of years, so I repotted this a bunch of years ago, and the growths should be this tall, and they're not. I think that's just because I repotted at the wrong time. I got a division of this from her. She cut off a division and gave it to me, and I repotted it, and I was like, whatever, I can grow this. It has sulked for at least 2 or 3 years with these teeny little growths. But of course, each new growth has put out a robust root system, so it's unfortunately and that's kind of one of the things of the clear pots is after a while they get coated in algae, which doesn't hurt the plant, but you can't see inside it anymore. So I can't really show you that this has a robust root system, but it does. In any case, it's finally, after 2 or 3 years, it's finally sulked long enough and has put out a new root system over this time that it feels it can start putting out larger growths. The flowers on this are absolutely amazing. This is one of Fred Clark's, this is from his breeding line. And so this is a problem plant that I think has turned the corner. And as you can see, this new growth is larger than the other ones already. And I'm hoping that it'll end up being here, and we'll keep building on these amazing these previous growths, so they can have an amazing bloom in the future. This one does not have any new roots out, so I'll keep an eye on this. And when it does, I'll get into a clay pot, which, like I said, I prefer. So this is a problem plant that's doing better. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the exceptions for bright light, or I gave you some generalities for bifoliate Cattleyas, and that's, those generalities are not always true for every species. So whenever you buy a new plant, a new species, or a new hybrid, learn what the species are and really try and understand where it comes from and its cultural conditions. So this is Cattleya Zachary, and it has not bloomed for me. It is blooming size, and this is an interesting species. As the new leaves are being formed and new growth, they'll kind of open up, and you'll see there's a swelling at the top. And as they're opening, it's almost like they're kind of vomiting flowers out. It's just this slow motion. As they open, the flowers come out at the same time. And I haven't gotten blooms on this one for unknown reasons. I grew this one very well in Hawaii when I lived there. I had it mounted, and I had it in bright, almost full sun for much of the day. And it was interesting to see each growth was trying to get away from the sun. It was actually growing around the back side of the mount, and I just let it grow, and it kept going that way. And later I learned that they don't like as bright conditions as I had thought. This particular one is a little bit of a problem child. It's sulked for a couple years. I think I finally got it in stride. I'm hoping that on the next growth cycle I'll get blooms. Like I said, this is a blooming size plant. This is a very large plant, actually. It should be blooming, but it's not. And I bring this up because this is one of the species that you would think would like bright conditions. From some of the literature, talking to the folks in Brazil, it's not a really bright grower. Although, when I was in Hawaii, it was getting blasted with light and doing really well. So, finally, my main problem child. This is Cataleya Glossa, and let's give you a tour of this sad, scraggly little thing that's just not doing well. This is its first bloom. I encourage you to look it up online to see what Glossa looks like. It's a really unique plant, really cool. And you can see that these blooms are just cracking open, and they're intensely fragrant. It's a really intense lemony scent, and it's just amazing. I really want this one to recover. So I posted this on Facebook. There's a group called Cataleya Lovers, and basically, if you're into Cattleyas, you need to be in that group. And I said, hey, why is this plant, which is next to all my other Cattleyas, doing so poorly? What's going on here? What am I doing wrong? I'm not super familiar with this particular species, and I got 2 replies. One of them said that looks like fusarium, and I'm not entirely sure that that's true. If it was fusarium, which is a type of fungus, I should cut into the rhizome and there would be a purple ring around it. I'm not entirely sure that's true, because the next answer that I got was from Caesar Wenzel, who, if you don't know who Caesar Wenzel is, and you're growing Cattleyas, you should know who he is, and I'll tell you. He's one of the Brazil's most famous breeders, and he's been doing it forever, and he has some of the best Cattleyas in the world. And he chimed in and said, hey, you know what? This one actually really doesn't do well in bright conditions. You should grow this one like a Phalaenopsis in terms of light, not water. And so this one has been getting, I just got my shade cloth up yesterday. So, here we are at the end of May, and, full Texas sun up until about 3 in the afternoon, 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And this guy has not done well, and I think that's the problem. So hopefully next year I can make another update video and show you that, hey, I put this one in much shadier conditions, and it came back. It's a big fat plant now, and I'm just so sad. So this is a first bloom, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 4, 6, 8 flowers. And for a first bloom to put out 8 flowers, that's really amazing. So this is a plant that I want to be better. Also notice the stem here just folded on itself. I don't even know if there's any juice getting to the flowers. I don't know if this particular bulb will live at that higher. But again, so I'm showing this to you, to show you that not all bifoliates really need bright light. This guy does not. Also to show you that there are some really great Facebook groups with some really amazing growers that can give you great tips. And finally, just research your plants, find out what you're growing and really what they prefer. So with that, adios. Talk to you later.